Well, hello, this is BJ Murphy, publisher of Neuse, and now that the state budget has been passed, actually without the governor's signature, we thought it would be a good time to bring in Representative Chris Humphrey as well as Senator Jim Perry to join us to discuss how they saw the budget unfold, how it benefits us here in Eastern North Carolina. Right now, I'm glad to have Senator Jim Perry. Jim, thanks for coming.
Hey, thanks for having me, BJ.
So you represent Lenoir, Craven, Beaufort counties now. You're chair of the Finance Committee. The governor, I was looking at it this morning because I remember being kind of shocked by his quote last week when the budget was passed. He said, "Make no mistake, overall this is a bad budget and seriously shortchanges our schools, prioritizes power grabs, keeps shady backroom deals secret, and blatantly violates the Constitution, and many of its provisions will face legal action. However, I'm going to allow this budget to pass become law without my signature." I would love to have your take on that.
Yeah, so, it's the art of saying a lot at one time without really saying much at all. It's just political hyperbole. If it's such a terrible budget, why not veto it? And I think because, like all budgets on balance, there's a lot of good in there. If you add up the budget bill with the money report, which is, all of that's required to get a budget, it's about 1,400 pages. If anyone thinks that I like everything in that budget, they're crazy. 1,400 pages, there's a lot of competing priorities, things that are important to this area or that area.
Right.
None of us love everything in there, but overall, that's a heck of a budget for the state, certainly for my district and the people that I represent in Eastern North Carolina.
And I want to get to the district here in just a minute, but first, the overarching theme of the budget, I've noticed that it had a spending plan cuts taxes by $1.2 billion for North Carolina families and business over the next 2 years, 7% pay raise for most state employees, including teachers across the biennium, and a 4% non-recurring payment for the general fund to supplement what retirees see for the retirement system. I'd love to have your take on these 2 or 3 really big ticket items there.
Sure. One of the first things I'll talk about is the one-time payment to retirees, and people wonder why that's not a recurring COLA or cost of living adjustment. And that's because you can't pay current employees from current appropriations and retired employees from current appropriations. Number one, that's not how that works structurally, but there'll never be enough cash. A one-time bonus cost about $60 million to pay retirees, a one-time 1% bonus. That same bonus, if it's recurring, because it has to be actuarially sound, would be about $600 million for 1%. So, 6 times 4, you can do the math on what it would cost, $2.4 billion. If you want to do recurring to retirees, well, then you eat into the money that you pay your current employees. So retirees are supposed to get any increases in their retirement from the retirement fund, returns in that fund. We have put hundreds of millions of dollars in it over the last few years, and we did want to do something for them, but we've got to continue to be pragmatic. Is it enough for any employee? I don't think any of us think that. I don't think any employee thinks that, but we have pushed it in the right direction.
Well, you didn't have teachers descending on the Capitol this year, fussing at you guys. So I thought that was just in and of itself a win for you. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the local projects. You got a little over $6 million for the city of Kinston for the Adkin Branch Mitigation Project. Why is this important to our area?
Well, it's just another step on flood mitigation. That's something we began working on a few years ago. We got some funds to do a study from the Environmental Defense Fund. They helped with that early. I think overall that project will be about $14 million, but you can't do all of it in one biennium. So by securing $6 million, we can take steps down that road and then work on additional funding in future budgets. But flood mitigation will continue to be a priority in Eastern North Carolina.
Because it will flood again.
That's right.
We know that. And think about the Global TransPark. I've told many people over the years, the Global TransPark, the idea of it was a big part of the reason why I knew I was coming back home. I didn't know why or what I was going to do. I just knew I was coming back home. And so to see the Global TransPark, what appears to be in a positive connotation in the halls of the General Assembly, is much nicer than the previous decade or so. I saw on here you got $30 million for the Global TransPark for a flight training and corporate office facility. Talk about that.
Yeah, so that is part of continued investment in the aviation space. And I agree, man. The global TransPark has been a tough topic over the years, but in the last 3 to 5 years, they've really gained a lot of traction in that aviation and military sector. Really focused effort, super proud of what they've accomplished. This $30 million, we see private investment from a private company out there investing about 35, 40 million of their own money in flight simulators. This will provide a corporate training center for them, continued job growth for the area. I think overall, if you add that 30 million with 25 million in the last biennium for the Aviation Center of Excellence for Lenoir Community College and an additional huge appropriation that you've seen, we're over $400 million of construction dollars being spent out there. This is a huge economic driver for our entire area.
And I certainly was going to be the last one I want to talk about here because my eyes just popped when I saw $350 million to the Global TransPark for an aircraft maintenance, repair, and overhaul facility. Please tell me there are some jobs coming with this.
Yeah, there absolutely are. It continues to support our military footprint. You know, a lot of folks hear about agriculture and they understand that that is our number one economic driver in the state. The military is our number two economic driver. FRC East is the largest private industrial employer east of Interstate 95, over 4,000 employees. As they're getting the F-35s down there, that new fifth generation fighter, they're going to need additional room. This is nothing new. The idea of moving some things here 2 years ago, they did it with the Huey helicopter to have additional space. So this would allow the Marine Corps and the Department of Navy to bring their C-130s here to Eastern North Carolina for maintenance and overhaul. They were out in Moab previously, so it's a great opportunity. You know, the average job down there is over $70,000 per year. I think it's about $72,000. Wonderful jobs for our area. It goes in line with that military and aviation sector that we've had so much success with. If you think about in the last budget, we eliminated the state income tax for military retirees. So we're continuing to take steps to secure our position as the most military-friendly state in the nation, but also in recognition of what it means to our community. Those 4,000 jobs at FRC East are not just for residents of Craven County. That's Craven, Beaufort, Pamlico, Carteret, Lenoir. You know, a lot of folks drive in there. And it also helps prevent any consideration of future BRAC, base realignment and closure issues. We haven't seen those around since the mid-90s, mid-2000s. You know, a lot of scare for us. But we want to do everything we can to be supportive and continue to find great paying jobs for our people here in Eastern North Carolina.
How soon do you think, and I want to get to a little lightning round here in a minute, but how soon do you think that our community here, our local restaurants and hotels will see some of the benefit of this enormous expansion here at the Global TransPark?
Well, we're already seeing a lot of it. We've seen a lot of growth out there already. I think this will be baked in over the next 3 years with all the construction, all of the economic activity out there and people coming to the area.
That's fantastic. I want to kind of get into a little lightning round, just bring up a topic. You give me your gut reaction to it, because one thing that I've heard a lot across the state here lately is part of the budget, actually delayed the budget a little bit. It's casinos.
Yeah.
Well, tell me about that. I was like, it's just like, wow, casinos are a possibility here?
Sure. Big issue in the state. And I think that it was, we did a poor job, or the General Assembly did a poor job of pushing that information out and talking about it early and often. I've seen a shift in thoughts and ideas in our state on several topics. That was one that surprised me. I pulled the district by county. I looked at Beaufort County, Craven County, Lenoir County. Our folks aren't bothered by the idea of casinos. And I'm talking unaffiliated voters, conservative voters, liberal voters. The Republican voters in my Senate district support the idea at 64%.
Wow.
And one of the reasons why is the economic development aspect of it. If we looked at Lenoir County's tax rate and we had a $500 million investment from a private company like that, we would get a recurring revenue stream of about $4.2 million added to our ad valorem taxes with no increase for anyone. You know, I think we pull in about $400,000 for every penny. So the impact is huge when we're talking about building schools or infrastructure needs or things that we, need in the community. And the attitudes have, and the thoughts have changed. A lot of people who may not personally want to go into a casino, they believe that others have the right to do that if that's what they want, because they believe they have that free will and that freedom. There are a lot of strong emotions on the far ends of it, those who really, really are against it or those who really, really support it. But the average person in my district would welcome the economic impact.
That was an interesting topic. One that I didn't know a lot about, and I because we're in the sports business, we got this very vaguely worded email or statement from the NCHSAA about how awful the budget was and how mean you guys were. I don't even know what happened there. What happened with NCHSAA as it came to the budget this year?
So that was not in the budget. That was a conference committee report that they're referencing. That's an agreement between the House and the Senate. I was not involved in that legislation, but I did read it. It required them to submit to open meeting law and conduct the meetings, like they're a state actor. It puts them in compliance with federal law. In the Brentwood case that ruled, I think it was the state of Tennessee, had a similar organization administering their athletics, and the state said, "Wait a minute, the courts said, federal court said, you're a state actor, right? So you've got to comply with open meetings law." You've got to do everything in the sunshine, let people know how you're making the decisions.
Right.
You must have audited financial statements. You've got to make financial disclosures. It also said that they couldn't keep more than 33% of gate receipts, that the local schools had to benefit from those in playoff games. And it changed the structure of some of their governing board. Most people don't realize this, but the way that the North Carolina High School Athletic Association was structured previously was against state law. They didn't have statutory authority to make some of the decisions they were making. The state board didn't have the authority to delegate certain responsibilities to them. Remember, we're Dillon Rule State, right? So if it's not written in statute giving you that authority, you don't have it. And the state board knew that. That's why they wanted to enter into a MOU, and some of the folks involved saw some steps taking to sidestep some of the things that they had indicated they would have to do with that memorandum of understanding. It is a change, but does it prevent them from administering high school athletics? No, not at all. I got involved in this topic during COVID. Whenever I received a call telling me that parents would have to sign up for a service and pay to watch their children participate in athletics in a local gym that our taxpayers pay for, they were going to have to pay to see that. And that wasn't right. My issue was resolved. Others were digging into other things more deeply, but that's the background.
That's interesting. I'll probably have to do a little bit more research on that. Medicaid expansion. I mean, we've heard about this topic for years now. I know when you went to, and I'm going to mention the another topic here. When you were at the Chamber of Commerce here, the Lenoir County Chamber of Commerce, kind of a wake up Lenoir breakfast. You talked about Medicaid expansion, but I've always heard Medicaid expansion from conservatives as being a negative thing for the state. More the liberal leaning, we're like, you've got to do it. It benefits people. Tell me why the General Assembly has come around and why Medicaid expansion makes sense for our state.
Well, I'm not going to speak for everyone. I'll tell you, how I evolved on the issue. I didn't understand it. I knew that I didn't want to give someone something for nothing. I think that's a bad idea. I think it's bad for society. I do have concerns about our national debt. But I'm a math person, right? So when I look at what the state was spending and what we could control and what the federal government could force on us, when I look at our local community, your commercial insurance is higher because North Carolina hasn't expanded Medicaid. The bottom line is that everyone in North Carolina has health care today. Just some people only have catastrophic care, and you pay for it.
Right.
One way or another, you're paying for it. Cost shift takes place. Commercial insurance rates are higher for small businesses. Property taxes are higher in Lenoir County because we hadn't expanded Medicaid. And people say, how that's possible? Well, I'll tell you how. We own the health care for people in that jail. If they're in jail and they need health care, the county has to pay for it, and not at a negotiated rate. The county has to pay full boat for it. We spend about $340 million for health care for inmates at state level. And if you've expanded, so that comes out of your state tax dollars or your local tax dollars, the county pays for it, ad valorem dollars. So when I started understanding that everyone has health care, we're just giving them catastrophic care and we're paying for it, it's driving our rates up and how it works. As a fiscal conservative, I have a choice. I can't control money going out of the federal government. I look at that like one pot of money. I can control what's coming out of the state coffers. Mm-hmm. If I have the ability to slow down money coming out of the state coffers and I don't do that, how's that fiscally conservative? Mm-hmm. So we had an option and a choice. When I really dug in and understood how it worked, it made financial sense to me, mm-hmm. Especially when I look at the state of healthcare in our rural areas. Mm-hmm. It's still a tough topic. The number of people who would be covered when we think about able-bodied working adults that most conservative has issues with, it's about 7%. So that means about 93% of the people covered we're okay with. Someone who can't do it for themselves, they're disabled or taking care of someone disabled, they're student. Conservatives are typically okay with that. So I'd call it 93% good in that aspect. Well, 93%, when I was a kid, that's an A, right? So we rarely have the ability to choose between a really good and a really bad decision. Mm-hmm. A lot of times what we have, not great decisions, and you do the best you can. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think we ended up.
The other topic you talked about that day at the Lenoir County Chamber of Commerce Wake Up Lenoir Breakfast, that surprised me a little bit on your take on it. Yeah. But I thought you explained your position well. Now I'd like people to hear it again, is medical marijuana. You said that day that 82% of your constituents endorsed the idea of medical marijuana, but only 27% supported recreational marijuana. Tell me the difference between the two and why this topic is important to you.
So medical marijuana is discussed at the state level, and that has not passed. I want folks to understand that. That would be something prescribed by a physician used in the privacy of your home. Truly medical. This isn't like get a card and walk out on the streets and everyone smell marijuana every day. A few things have touched me on that. One, my own family and my daughter having a series of surgeries over the last 6 years and seeing her prescribed opioids to deal with pain. That's one of the scariest things I've been through as a parent. Mm-hmm. And, I hear people say, well, it's not FDA approved. And I was sitting in a committee hearing with a colleague who has lost a child. And he brought up the fact, someone said, hey, it's not FDA approved, not enough testing on it. Doctors haven't signed off. And he said, you mean like they did on OxyContin? And that really struck me. And I thought about it. And if your child is suffering or has cancer or some serious problem, and you look at me and say, hey, this is my child, and I would rather start here and try to get relief here versus going down to opioids or whatever the choice is, who am I to tell you can't make that personal medical choice for your family? Mm-hmm. And it's been a real struggle. But at the end of the day, we have enough government intervention in our lives. You don't need me taking away your free will and your freedoms for how to care for your family from a medical standpoint as a part-time lawmaker. I don't think that's my place. I don't think that's the place of government. And 82% of my constituents feel that way. So
in other words, if I heard you correctly, basically you're saying that OxyContin is a type of a drug that people get hooked on. Yeah. Marijuana is not something that people typically get hooked on, but there are benefits to either one of them, and maybe the idea of lessening some of that the ability or need or desire to get hooked on that is probably a better first step than maybe something as strong as an opioid.
I've never seen anyone die from an overdose of marijuana. I've never read about it. We look at the OxyContin and the opioid issues we have today. We look at the fentanyl problems. Men create a lot of problems in society when they are intending to do good. Mm-hmm. Men stand against a lot of change in society for the right reasons. But I think when I start telling you how to live every aspect of your life, BJ, by any definition, that's just tyranny. Mm-hmm. We don't need the government telling you how to care for your family. That's the way I feel about it.
Mm-hmm. The last topic I want to mention to you, and I'll give you the floor if there's any other final thoughts you want to give. Redistricting. I've heard some talk about that. I always thought redistricting happened once a decade. After the census was over, 2020, there's redistricting. There's this whole talk about, is it a fair process? Are politics involved? And I'm kind of going, whether you have a nonpartisan board or not is going to be political. There's just no way around it. That's at least my take on it. But why is the topic of redistricting coming up again?
So we've got a rich history of the courts being involved in redistricting here, running back to the 70s and 80s. It's happening now, but first of all, you can redraw congressional maps every 2 years. There's no restriction on how often to draw those. Our state Supreme Court ruled that because the courts improperly stepped in before and handed the map drawing process to these special masters, who, by the way, had donated to political candidates before they drew those maps. They delegated this process to them. They usurped it and took the power away from the General Assembly. Our state Supreme Court said, yeah, that's not you guys drawing them. So you get to go draw these maps now. So they want us to draw maps that last throughout the end of the decade. We'll start that probably the week of October 9th. We'll start with congressional maps, and then we'll redo the House and Senate maps. There's really only so many changes that can be made. I'm more familiar with the Senate maps because of something called the Stevenson ruling that requires whole counties to be grouped together. In my opinion, 85 to 90% of those maps draw themselves because of that court case. They have to fit together like a puzzle piece and have the right population.
I'm a fan of that because I remember at one time where I live, one election, it was David Rouser was my congressman. The next one was Dr. Murphy. But our entire county was split between 1, 3, and 7. We had Butterfield, Rouser, and Murphy representing our county. And I'm like, we're only a county of 60,000 people. It's like we shouldn't have 3 different representatives splitting us up in Congress. So I like that ruling. I like the idea that you got to put the whole county together. Will this possibly affect your district? Because since you've been in office, you've gone closer to the coast. I mean, you probably don't mind that too much, but Lenoir County is certainly home to you. It was Lenoir Wayne. I know now it's Beaufort and Craven. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so I have a huge district. It's over 2,200 square miles. It's a beast to cover. I don't anticipate there would be many changes to my district, if any, because our districts get bigger in the east as we lose population, right? And there's only so many ways to piece them together. But I would say it remains to be seen as to whether or not that district will change. I don't know what groupings I'll have in the future, but there's only so many configurations that you can have and piece counties together. So we'll see how that goes the week of the 9th. I think everyone's sort of up in the air about what they're going to look like.
Was there any other topic you want to make sure you mention to the constituents or the people who watch or read or listen to Neuse that you want to make sure you get across now that the budget is done and you're going into a slower time of year as terms of politics are concerned?
Yeah, so, I got a new district in January, on January 1. I think January 30th, we were in session. So it's going to be good to be able to be home and be out in the district more and get to know some folks in the new part of my district. We've got a good thing going in Raleigh. I think here locally, we've got a good thing going. I enjoy serving with Representative Humphrey. We've been friends for a long time, and he always backs my play. I always back his play when it's something we're working on for the East. The decisions aren't as simple as between good and bad, for us. And we lose representation in the rural areas every year. So it's important to be unified and to make hay while the sun shines. So while we've got a delegation that works well together, we really need to maximize for Eastern North Carolina.
We appreciate your service here for Eastern North Carolina, Jim. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thank everybody for watching and listening. Be sure to stay tuned to NeuseNews.com, where we'll kind of do a summary of this interview with Senator Jim Perry, and I will also have that interview with Representative Chris Humphrey as well. Until next time, again, this is B.J. Murphy. Thank you so much.